All right. Okay. So I'm here with Chris and Emily, and they're basically behind the middle school of MST, and we're now in this beautiful garden with a very annoying background. And all right. So first of all, thank you. This is actually we're shooting this on the weekend. They're actually working here on the weekend, and I'll probably ask some naive questions for whoever first seeing this first time. First of all, maybe do you mind introducing a bit about yourself and your education journey that brought you to MST in Japan?
Sure. I'm Emily Dowell, and I'm here at the Montessori School of Tokyo as the adolescent lead guide and coordinator. And I've been working in Montessori for now about 15 years. And I was actually a Montessori child before that, and have really had a great opportunity to travel the world working in Montessori programs, specifically 12 to 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's my sweet spot.
And Chris.
I'm Chris Marks, Emily's husband. I'm one of the guides at MST, one of the classroom guides. I've been doing Montessori for maybe 17 or 18 years, from the youngest up into the adolescent stage. And we have a Montessori daughter, I guess, who has just shows how Montessori works. She's just graduated university, and often in your life, she's been one of those reasons that I got into Montessori in the first place. So
Yeah.
And a little bit about how we landed here in Tokyo is that both Chris and I have been very involved in the global work of trying to raise awareness around Montessori being not just for young ones, not just those under sixes that we think about, but that it goes all the way through. And there's a vision to 18 and high school. And so we've been part of that vision and work for about 10 years. And when the opportunity came to try that out here in Tokyo, which is one of the most vibrant and rich historically and also modern life-wise places to live, but also really urban. And Montessori is traditionally, at the age we support, is traditionally more of a land-based work. We jumped at the opportunity to see how far we could push the principles and the pedagogy in one of the most urban places in the world.
Yeah, and that's why we're here. And this particular space is a work over the last 5 years, right? Chris would say.
We've been here for 5 years, and we've had the vision of trying to, again, we were saying, push the boundaries and see what we could put in place here. We've had quite a range of experiences. We've been out into the country with the kids doing work and doing some permaculture, and always borrowing from others' experiences and offering them tastes. But this is one where we can bring all that stuff and make a project of their own that will pass on from this year to next year and the following years. And they'll experience every day and they'll benefit from, and probably keep working on, building on.
Yeah. Just a bit of context, because of the rooftop garden opened actually just last weekend, and I came here. I was blown away because, as many of you know, we started school ourselves, and then even when Xiaomai came this morning, I said, "Wow, this is just like our school." Now, because when we started, we had a rooftop as well. We had a very small space back then in Beijing, and we had those planting boxes for kids in our first year. And I know how much work it was. Not only the physical work to get the stuff running, but also kind of getting the community behind it, getting whatever, right? All the, and especially, I think this kudos to you guys, because when we started for the little kids, so it's the adults that did most of the work. And this is actually a education effort, because the work was done with the adolescent. Yeah, can you share a bit of the journey of when from the ideation to completion?
I think kudos goes to our managers, our student managers, and that's an important thing to say. It's the weekend, so they're off having fun. But it feels a little strange talking about a project that really was envisioned and implemented by the adolescents in the community. And so when we came 5 years ago, this rooftop had a little bit of growing space, which is one of the key principles of Montessori at the adolescent age, right? Is that they should be caring for the land and also finding ways of feeding themselves, growing their own food, but then also engaging in activity that means that if there's a surplus of food that they're growing, that they're selling that and participating in an economic system as well. And we really saw the opportunity and potential here on the roof to maximize this space. But it was our adolescents who put together the vision. So about 18 months ago, one of our long-term students, she's been here at MST since she was a toddler. So she's grown up all the way through in Montessori. And she was really motivated. We have a coffee business as well, a little cafe. And that's been a very public-facing part of the middle school. And she felt that the garden was being neglected and underappreciated. And so she decided in her 9th year that she wanted to take on becoming the manager of the garden and really, as she said, like make it a jewel of the program. So that's where it started about 18 months ago. Then we had some natural problem solving that had to come up and emerged when we developed a leak in our roof, pardon me. And so that then was a new opportunity to be flexible in their thinking and their vision. And we had to do some repair work and strip away some of what was already here. But in doing that and fixing the roof leak, then we got this opportunity to totally re-envision what could be here on the roof and turn it into a space the adolescents really wanted. A space, first of all, where they could be up here and enjoy and be comfortable in. So that's the shade and all of the extra growing space where they could host events and have the cafe. So we have sort of that little business zone, and then they could also expand what they were growing so that they're doing more year-long growing and growing more things that they can sell to the public, either just as vegetables and fruit or in products that they make in other parts of their small businesses.
There's nothing like a crisis to kind of bring out that creative problem solving, that necessity of we have to fix this, we have to find a solution.
So that was a leak.
That was the leak.
Yeah. So it was a leak somewhere on the...
There was a leak on the roof, and so the whole roof had to be torn up, which our kids did.
Oh, they didn't turn...
They took all the turf down,
including several tons of sand, which
seriously
had accumulated on the roof. They bagged it and took it all back to nothing. Yeah, so the kids were involved with removing the old roof, and the roof was then repaired, and then that provided us the opportunity as a cohort of teachers or guides to plan. We just rearranged the last little year to take advantage of the crisis and the opportunity to get all hands on deck, and everyone had a responsibility, and we shifted a little bit of our budget that was left into let's beautify this space. Let's make it a research-based, design-based, very practical project with a very real and tangible outcome.
Yeah.
That they'll all have their hands involved. And the nice thing about doing it at the end of the year, it's also a handover to next year.
Right.
So the kids who are working the hardest, a lot of them will be moving on and not here next year, so they won't be benefiting from it, but they're kind of leaving it as their legacy, I guess. So the work is real, and it's kind of air of I'm passing this over, and this is a little bit of me I leave behind. And when they come back in August, I'm sure a lot of them will, and I'll plan something grown and
Yeah.
thrived, and the bees are in, and things like that. They'll just love it.
Yeah. It's amazing. I think well, of course, I'm not involved in the process, but it feels like there are a few phases. So there is the, as you say, the envisioning phase, and then there is this entire phase of getting, organizing themselves, and they're like, it feels like now you're moving to the third phase. If once this is up and running, you have to keep it as a live space,
Yes.
right? Not only for students and also for the community. Can you say a bit more about the community part? Because I think that's missing in so many of the international schools.
Yeah, they're really going back to what Emily was mentioning about the whole idea of the adolescent experience. There's this the land-based program.
Yeah.
The way I've always kind of interpreted and understood it is it's a safe place to practice things, and because you have a very connected community, and so MST is our community. So this is a space that is not only for our kids but for the whole community, and making it a space where they can host some of their events, they can host sales, they can try out some of these things that they're stepping into, dipping their toes into, and really exposing themselves creatively, academically, and almost emotionally, in a safe space with that safe and comforting, helpful community of MST parents and staff. Yeah. It's confidence building. They can fail and try there and improve and try again. Perfect. It's just, that's what the community is really all about.
Yeah.
In Montessori Adolescents environment that we have. Is my perspective on it, or one perspective.
And it's interesting working in an international school that's a Montessori-based pedagogy because, well, in our experience, we've traveled around, but we've always been in schools that are really deeply embedded in the community. And the people who come to the school have lived in those communities for years and years and years. Being here at MST, it's a different type of community. We do have those long-term families who've been in Tokyo for quite a number of years and intend to be here, but we also have people who are short stay families, but we want to make sure that part of being in a community is feeling that sense of shared values and priorities and being a part of the history, but also being a part of the future of that community. And we see that this space and the things that our adolescents do are really helping to build those bridges and those connections within the MST community, so that whether you're a long-term, long-stay family here in Tokyo, or a family that's here for a short time, that you really are kind of opened, the arms are open and you're brought into this place, and it can feel like a bit of a home away from home for people, and that's what our adolescents are working on, both by providing spaces for parents to meet, and, for example, quite often other rooms or classrooms, their parents will host events here, so there's that social aspect, or building connections between the different age levels of classrooms, and our adolescents are a part of that by hosting fairs and events and different school-aged activities. They have a café that's exclusively for the children at the campuses, and so you get that cross-age community building as well.
Yeah.
But then also sometimes the space is just for our teenagers and our adolescents, and they sometimes bring their friends from outside MST, which is a nice thing to be able to do, but for them to feel like this is their space as well, and that they don't have to just leave school at 3:30 and socialize and find other places to be, but that this is a place for them to have their social life as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a really unique aspect of what we do in Montessori.
Thank you, because I think for I can appreciate how hard it is, because as you said, because your earlier experience in the beginning when you did your introduction, most were in Canada, right? Or was it how many?
Canada, North America,
Yeah.
the U.S.
Yeah. And then here is a very different community, and then it's in a way it's harder to hold a community together because it's not an indigenous people live here. So there's so much work behind. You know, as guys, you not only you're doing school, you're sort of waving the community together, right?
So often our role is, we say a lot, we're the institutional knowledge.
Right.
We're the keepers of the stories. Very often when we're talking to our adolescents to help them understand perhaps why they're facing the challenge that they're facing, or why we're doing something a certain way we're doing it always begins with let me tell you a story. 3 years ago or whatever. And a lot of our work, I think, is putting into context for them the history of this community and inviting them into seeing that adolescents, or prior to them, who were here in the community before they had the opportunity to make choices and guide where we went in our learning and our life as a community. And so that's brought us to this point, but that now it's their turn to do that thinking and visioning and creation. And that's, I think, really important is giving adolescents the opportunity to actually have agency in their learning, but also in just their lives. And that's what we offer here to them. And then, as Chris said, they move it forward a little bit and leave it for then the next group of adolescents coming in to use their imaginations and see the possible improvements or potential for something even better, which is what we do as humans, right? We're just always moving things along and hoping for making things better and better, right? And that's what each generation does. And that's what our adolescents need practice in, because they are going to be very soon the adults who are being tasked with thinking through these big questions about how do we improve life for humans, life for the planet, life for every creature here. And that's big work. So let's start with a rooftop.
No, this is beautifully said. Indeed, because I share so many, fundamental values. It's the same thing, especially I think in the East Asian culture, education is narrowed down to something, let's just learn something and get a test, right, and go somewhere. But it's so much more. And I was really, I was struck by the, the words you mentioned, creation, imagination. I mean, at the end of the day, those are like the fundamental things that enable us to be who we are and enable the human race not to be disappeared from the surface of the earth. But that's kind of usually dismissed in education, right? Because it's kind of fluffy stuff, right? How much of this labor translate to my son's test score, right? And then you cannot answer that question. So that's why part of it, I really appreciate what you guys do. But that's, in essence, that's exactly what it is. If your education doesn't bring you to a place where you can imagine and create in a constantly moving environment, then the education has failed, right? And then
and one of the guiding principles and ideas of Montessori is that a principle of adaptation, of being adaptable, that we as humans have been able to adapt ourselves to our environment, adapt our environment to our needs. We don't have the biological ability to adapt and change our bodies, but we've been gifted with a mind that can think critically, that can be abstract, that can imagine, that is creative. We have these great hands of ours, right, that mean we can create in so many different ways. And then we also work together. We've, for thousands of years, we've been a collaborative species that knows that we can't do everything by ourselves, And so we have to work collaboratively. And when we do that, we accomplish great things. And another piece of that too is that the morality and the ethics of learning and working and building and creating and thinking about how our choices or the adolescents' choices are going to impact other people. And that's another piece that necessarily doesn't always get measured on an exam or a test score. But to the point of tests and evaluation, especially for young adolescents, you know, we don't necessarily give a test on volume and surface area and things like that, but we know that our students understand those principles because they had to design the garden beds and order enough soil. And isn't that the greatest test?
Yeah.
It's when the soil arrives for delivery to see, did we order enough? Did we order too much, right? And managing the budget associated with that. All of the different elements, you know, are going to be tested, but tested in reality.
Right.
And that provides a much higher level of purpose and engagement for our students.
Yeah.
And we see that. They take the time, for example, the decking platform, they were here one night until past 9:30, fixing it and setting it up and making sure that it was sitting right, because they knew that they were opening in a few days and they wanted to make sure that it was safe and it looked good. And they had that responsibility, which meant that they would take the time to really become experts at laying deck.
Yeah. Thank you for making that connection, because I think exactly that's right. I'll get to Chris. I have a question for you too. But it was interesting because sometimes people separate from, if you're doing the fluffy stuff, that means you're not learning. But actually, that's where learning really happens, because it's the real context and problems that they're facing, right? So I think I was wondering if Chris, I know you were trying to say something, but you can be connected. Is that how does that, especially for people who are listening to this who didn't know much about, you know, pedagogy and all that, if you can give a few examples of how does this kind of work connects to their, like, the understandable education, like maths and physics.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess many ways. Where do we start? Like Emily was mentioning, the math and the planning around the garden beds. With the building itself, we started with the visioning process and thinking about, well, what do we want? What do we want? What's our goals? What do we need? And practical thinking around that, because we were talking about basketball hoops in our initial thing, and the joke was the whirlpool, sauna and things like that, all the extra things they could put in. And but once they get through all that stuff, and the brainstorming and the visioning, it comes down to making something very realistic and manageable that they can do. But with that spirit, they can push things a little bit here and there. So we started out with some of that planning stage, and then we made a scale model of the roof, and then we started to plan out the sections. Then we started to take our budget that we had. We started to research these things that we want to build. What kind of materials are available? How much are the materials? And what are the best materials to use? And what are the materials that we can afford? What are the best materials that we can afford? So all of that, that thinking on their feet and adaptation and changing the plan from day to day just to better meet what was practical, what was realistic. Then the communication involved. They in one case they ran out of, they were over budget on the decking, and one of the things they did is we tasked them with what can we do? Let's be creative about this. And we thought about, let's ask for some money from outside. And so they put together a presentation for the finance department at the school. Who were they're businessmen and people, and they they want to see the numbers, they want a good presentation, and they're not just going to give them the money that they want because they want it. And they did their due diligence. They did some comparative analysis of different options. They made a really creative and informative slideshow, and they knew their stuff. They rehearsed and practiced, and they had like intention to wow their audience. It was something they had never met before. They just showed up from the head office to hear them speak, and they presented, and he was suitably impressed, I guess, because he not only granted them the funding, but he chose their recommendation, which was the most expensive, because they made the argument. Right. So there's a lot of great communication, analysis, planning, math and physics and all those things that we see that happen in design. But some of those soft skills about, well, how do we present this? How do we talk about this? How do we convince someone of our arguments? So yeah, I mean, that's one of the highlights of it that I witnessed. That's all. Because they were so happy. Like there's nothing like when. Yeah,
it's like a real presentation. It's not like just.
They stayed back from gym.
This is where the rubber hits the road.
They stayed back from gym to do their presentation up here on the roof.
I was going to add that so often in this problem-based or project-based work that we do, it starts with the curiosity and the naivete of being a young person. And really, as Chris was saying, having these big dreams and finding something in that big vision that feels meaningful to them. So the deck, adding a pergola, growing more berries so that you can eat the berries. And they find something that they connect with in the purposeful work of making the world a better place. But then they realize that they have knowledge gaps. To be able to execute on their vision, they're going to have to do some learning. So things like, for example, our student who was really interested in adding more berries to our garden, she learned that different berries have a preference for different soil pH. And so, well, then what does pH scale mean? And then that developed into an examination and an understanding about soil chemistry. And she had to put a plan together about how she was going to meet the needs of different plants in this environment. Building the pergola required some understanding about forces, but also they had to construct cement pilings, and it can be as simple as understanding for the first time that cement is a mixture, right, that is made up of actually different substances, and you can have that sort of first introduction to basic ideas of what mixtures are and solutions and all of that science around that, all the way into much more complicated examinations of when I mix the cement, it goes from a liquid to a solid, and also there's some heat created, right? And then you can dig into the chemistry of what sort of reactions are happening there. So there's always an entry point for each adolescent to examine and explore something in an academic way that meets their level of challenge and interest as well, which doesn't necessarily happen if you're going by a set curriculum for a set age group at a certain time. But that's how we cover academics, is because they have to know stuff to be able to execute on their plans. And they will spend a lot of time becoming experts, especially with the support of guides and Chris, or talking to people in the community who are also experts in that field, so that they can execute on what their vision is. That's where we get engagement in learning.
Yeah. It's the why or the why is from themselves rather than external.
Right.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we ask the why.
Yeah.
Why are you buying that? Why do you need to go do that? What's the thinking behind that? And then they're like, our garden manager did a long-term study of the sun tracking and how it travels in the sky and what that meant for shade and direct sunlight here on their roof. And that was like a 2-week project of understanding the science behind it and then figuring out a system for tracking it. And then she could have some evidence to base her choices on, and it wasn't just a willy-nilly, I'm going to throw this here. We want our plants to be successful. They've spent a lot of money on it. on their plants, and so it's in their best interest to make sure that they're making informed choices.
Yeah.
And those failures are important too when they do just throw the wrong thing in the wrong space. It doesn't thrive, and they have to explain why
they died.
And I use this much of our community money for this because you need to be accountable. And so failure is an important step
for growth. For growth and learning. We don't learn from our perfections. We learn from our mistakes. and that's a really important part of the learning process. We got a valuable lesson about the difference between linear meters and board meters, right? In construction and carpentry, which then could have been a big disaster to realize, we can't make as many cuts on our boards as we thought to make the planters. But instead of it being a failure, it's just an opportunity to rethink and be creative and redesign, which is reality. Things don't always happen perfectly. But we also really want them to have that attitude of confidence in there are going to be mistakes and bumps along the way. And that they know that they've got the skills to think through those pieces, be resilient, and problem solve, and not be afraid to try things without being reassured that they're going to be a success right away. Right? That nothing is usually a success right away. It's taken us 5 years to get to this point, right? It's not an overnight thing, but each attempt, you learn something, you move forward, you grow. And I don't know, I mean, young people today, we do see that hesitation, that if they're not going to present a perfect product, they try to stay in their comfort zone. And we're really trying to help them dream bigger and be comfortable with the discomfort of growth.
Thank you so much, because originally my last question, both of you covered it already. My last question I have intended was like, what's the biggest surprise or setback during the process? Which you said you already
a million.
I know. Let me go down the list. But I think and you covered so beautifully and saying like that's exactly how we learn. But maybe I'll just twist the question a little bit and saying that now after all those setbacks, you both as very seasoned educators, in different parts of the world and now with this community for a long time, like what are some of the things or reflections you have on today's education? Because that's something I constantly think for myself. And then in a way, Montessori seems to be very like dated, right? Because people would think, land-based, and then planting little things seems so slow. and then we're talking about AI and talking about all that stuff. But on the other hand, I really appreciate what you said in the very beginning. You said land-based is creating a safe environment, right? That is safety not only in terms of physical safety, but also, I guess, mental or psychological safety. So I wonder, given this beautiful story of this journey with students, what are some of the things you think about that keep you awake as an educator?
Well, first, technology, cell phones, that robbing our kids of their youth and opportunity to experience things for real.
Mm.
I think one of the things that's like, anecdotally that's really resonates with me as an adult is that I wasn't great at school, and school wasn't something that I really enjoyed, and I couldn't bring that as my role in school. I think it's like there's some people who don't like math, they don't feel comfortable, but they still feel accomplishment from doing things and from learning on their own and from finding out for themselves. And I think that's what Montessori is about. It's about we're given opportunities to discover knowledge. And I was talking about some of the things that they discover on the roof. And that's like every day, whether it's in the kitchen or picking up an instrument, just giving them the opportunity to discover themselves. It's so powerful, and that's the kind of information that you build into yourselves as a young child and also as an adolescent. So I really feel strongly, or I guess I'm really concerned, or my big concern, if it was anything, would just be like so much of those experiences are taken away
from them.
because they live in this area and it's all solved for them. I need to find the solution. Well, that's right here. I need to learn how to play this song. Well, that's right here. I need to say this. Well, ChatGPT will say it for me. So I feel for that trying, failing, learning, and owning they learn a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big deal. You may add a bit because I recently had a conversation with the author of Anxious Generation. Jonathan Haidt. Yeah, because his book was translated to Chinese, and so part of my work is I have dialogue with his authors, and so I had a talk with him recently to be aired. Yeah, like that entire book is full of data of that. Yeah, and then people are saying like, what really happens in education is that the real impact is often delayed, right? So like, when the internet bubble came, when technology came, everybody feels like everything was cool. But like now we, as a social psychologist, you look back the data 10 years and say, hey, talk about the generation between, so basically who were born around after 1995 because they were 15 by 2010 when social media picked up, and you see such a high increase in their mental issues and all that. But of course it's delayed. So I think although it's delayed, it's trying to kind of wake people up and saying that you're not helping them by giving them, you're actually, if anything, you're destroying their, exactly as you say, like the precious learning journey that would have naturally happened.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like I am guiding and teaching different adolescents than I did when I started this work 14, 15, 16, whatever it was, 15 years ago, before phones were so prevalent in their lives from beginning to end. Our first group didn't have that, and you just really see a difference in type of adolescent.
Right. Yeah. But one thing he advocated in the book is like what you can do is the phone-free school, which at least that's
what we've done
doing.
Here.
Yeah.
And we've seen a difference already. Just having that.
Right.
That break from 8 o'clock when they arrive till they leave. Whichever time that is, 4 o'clock or even 9 o'clock at night sometimes.
Right.
I mean, it just gets
preserved at least.
And it gives them permission. I think that's the other thing. It gives them permission to not need to have their phone.
Yeah.
It's like, because there is this drive, as you know the way they work, there's this drive that I do have to have it with me.
Yeah.
But we would have say, so it lets them take a break.
Right.
I kind of hope that we also give parents permission to delay that decision, because it feels for us, I think that adolescence is the time, because you're changing schools, or you're changing rooms, or you're moving into this new environment, that's when you get a smartphone and giving children the world, good, bad, and ugly, this device, and a lot of times with absolutely no controls or oversight.
Right.
And so with this phone-free school, we really advocate that, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You can say no. We will totally support that. Use us as the excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to be part of a phone-free school.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Montessori is so based on the idea of giving the right prepared environment to help optimal development. And so I think that's one of the reasons why most Montessorians we see a difference between technology, right, that helps us move our lives forward, and it's a positive thing, and it's a tool that we use, and social media or things that seem to just really, especially for adolescents, be a barrier to healthy and optimal development. The thing that keeps me up at night, or the thing I worry about and consider a lot, is over the time that I've worked with adolescents and gotten to know this period of life a lot better, it's just a concern about how we in society view the adolescent years and teenage years, and the amount of pressure we put in most societies on the adolescent years to have them either be figuring out their life and their future adult selves, or working really hard. What I think about a lot as an educator of adolescents is that we put a lot of emphasis. We know the importance of the under 5 years and what a period of growth and sensitivity that is. And historically in society, we've kind of been dismissive of adolescence. It's like this holding pattern. It's about buckling down and getting serious about your work and schooling, and the competitive nature of post-secondary education and the pressure that parents feel about making sure their children are successful, which typically in our Western cultures of success means that they have a job and a salary that means that they can accumulate stuff. Puts a lot of pressure on young people to be performing in an academic way, when really what we know about this time of life is that it's just this amazing opportunity of growth and potential in all of these other areas of life, in their social development, their emotional and moral development, that they have this amazing creativity and a vision of improving the world. They don't know what's not possible, so they want to try. But we have created a system for adolescents that most adults are trying to really fit them into a package that feels reassuring to us as adults, and it's going to make them possibly more attractive to a university recruiter. But what we're seeing is that it's not producing happy, successful, creative adults. And so I would really like to see more interest in adolescents and in research, in parenting, in helping support optimal healthy growth, and a reimagining of what the purpose of adolescence is, because I don't think from a developmental or evolutionary point of view, the purpose of adolescence was to get into university, because there were no universities 100,000 years ago. And to Chris's point about technology, humans, we have grown and developed and evolved in a certain way, and that biology hasn't changed. Our world is changing, but what we are in our essence hasn't. And it keeps me up at night to see adolescents feeling like they don't have a power, that this is a hard time of life, when actually it's just this age of rich opportunity. And I really feel like we've delivered as adults, we've delivered that message to them. And we are also not capitalizing on the energy and potential that really great, rich education and support as adolescents can bring to us now, because teenagers have a lot that they can offer the world, but also as they become adults, the types of adults they could actually become. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Beautifully said. One thing I was thinking just lastly, I think it's the reason what you're saying, that message we're getting, I just want to add that because Emily did this beautiful sharing with the community a few days ago around the plan for a high school. And it struck me, deeply when you say exactly, I think everybody understands from 0 to 3 is an important time, like 80% of the neurons get connected. But adolescent is just another of such period, right? So it's also, there are a lot of rewiring and so on. But like we kind of dismiss that, as you say, because we are so much more cruel to them because they look tall, right? Because they look like you're adults and you're like, you don't understand this. So like I think there's this kind of dichotomy is shocking because they were still a growing brain and massive period and very rapid growing, but like we kind of become dismissive. And then really thank you for bringing that out, like saying that as another period as important, if not more important than the 0 to 3. Right. So thank you really for highlighting this. So like for us, like who are both, because all of us as parents or educators probably know a lot more to 0 to 3 because they seem to be manageable. Right? Because by the time they're like 6 foot tall, like I can't manage it.
They start talking back and sharing their opinions.
Right.
But
we're so ignorant of that period in general, right?
We are. And also I'm reflecting myself as I get older. I realize that as adults, we work on efficiency. We've developed our systems and our patterns and our comfort zones. We don't think as quickly as they do. We're a little more set in our ways, and all of that youth can be a little confronting.
Right.
When if you have been used to seeing yourself as an adult, as in a position of power or authority, or this is the way it's always been done, right? And then these young people come and they challenge all of that and make your head think a different way, and that's growth is confronting for everyone. But I guess the other thing though too, having worked so long with adolescents as well, is there's something reassuring to know, because sometimes we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves as adults that we have to get it right. But really, if you set up even just a beginning of an environment that's a little more ideal, that adolescents are really good at getting what they need out of an environment. And so they're really resilient, and they can flourish despite us. And so that's another thing for teachers and for parents is I think we put a little too much pressure and emphasis on the importance of us in their development, and actually they're doing okay. They'll do okay. They'll find their way through.
Yeah. All right. That's a beautiful ending to this. Thank you so much, both of you.